Have you ever stopped to think how seemingly abstract philosophical ideas, things people came up with centuries ago, could actually really shape the world we live in today? Influencing everything from our science to our politics.
It's kind of amazing when you trace it back.
Yeah. So today, we're diving deep into French materialism. And trust me, this isn't just some dusty old academic topic.
Right.
It was a vibrant, even revolutionary intellectual movement. It sparked completely new ways of thinking, and, well, as we'll get into, it actually laid the groundwork for some major social systems.
Right. We've gathered some really fascinating sources on this. They look at its foundations, its pretty fierce battles against the dominant ideas of the time, and revealed this surprisingly direct link to movements like, well, socialism and communism. So our mission today is to kind of unpack how this philosophy grew through two distinct but connected trends, how it challenged the established metaphysics, the sort of accepted reality of the time, and why its core ideas became this direct theoretical foundation for some really influential political ideologies in the 19th century and even beyond.
Yeah, I think people might be surprised. Get ready for some potential aha moments, connecting maybe ancient Greek thought all the way to, modern political structures.
Exactly.
Okay, let's try and unpack this then. When we talk about French materialism,
Yeah.
our sources say speaking exactly in the prosaic sense, which basically means plainly speaking.
Right. Getting down to brass tacks.
Yeah, it wasn't just an intellectual game. It was this really clear opposition to the big philosophical ideas of the 17th century, metaphysics mainly. And crucially, it created this direct link to socialism and communism later on in the 19th century. It's like a quiet philosophical revolution with some really loud results down the line.
And what's so interesting is that it wasn't just one single thing. Right. It wasn't monolithic. Our sources show it actually came from two different philosophical streams. One started with Descartes.
Which might surprise some people.
Yeah, definitely. And the other came from Locke. So it kind of begs the question, how did these two seemingly pretty different starting points end up merging into such a powerful force?
Okay, let's dig into that.
Yeah.
First up, the Descartes connection. Now, Descartes, most people probably think mind-body dualism, right? Mind and body are separate things.
This is a classic view, yeah.
But our sources point out that his physics, separate from his metaphysics, was actually key here. He apparently saw matter as having self-creative power, and mechanical motion was, for him, like the expression of its life.
Within his physics, yes.
Yeah.
He specifically separated that from his metaphysics. So in that physical realm he described, matter was the only substance.
Right. So how did the materialists use that?
Well, that's the clever bit. Mechanical French materialism basically took Descartes' physics, the dynamic matter part, but totally rejected his metaphysics, the mind-body split.
Okay.
For them, there was no need for a separate mind or spirit. It could all be explained by matter and motion. They often called themselves anti-metaphysicians or just, physicists.
So very science-focused.
Exactly. And this school, it starts with a physician, Leroy, peaks with another physician, Cabanis, and the really central figure was physician Lametrie.
Okay, Lametrie. And here's where it gets, well, really radical for the time, right? Leroy and then Lametrie in his famous work, Man-Machine. They took Descartes' idea that animals are just machines.
Right, biological automata.
And applied it to humans. They basically said the soul is just a modus of the body, meaning like just the function of the physical stuff?
Pretty much. Not a separate entity, but just how the body, especially the brain, operates. And ideas, just mechanical motions in the brain.
Wow. That's profoundly materialist. And this Cartesian way of thinking, especially in science, apparently it still has legs in France today.
It does, particularly in certain scientific approaches. And our sources know it was, least of all, reproached with romanticism, meaning it was seen as very hard-headed, rational, not fuzzy at all.
Got it.
And we should also mention this wasn't entirely new ground. Even Descartes' metaphysics had critics early on, like Gassendi, who was bringing back Epicurean materialism.
From ancient Greece?
Yeah, and the English materialist Hobbes, too. So there's this thread, going way back to Democritus and Epicurus, feeding into both the French and English versions of materialism.
Okay, so that's the Cartesian mechanical side. Now, what about the other major trend? This one's often called empirical or sensationalist materialism, and it's seen as the natural-born son of Great Britain.
Right, the emphasis shifts here from the inherent properties of matter to how we know anything at all through our senses.
And this goes back quite a way, too, even to Duns Scotus, a medieval thinker, who apparently wondered if matter itself could think.
He did raise the question, yeah. And he was a nominalist, basically believed universal concepts are just names we give things, they aren't real essences out there. That itself was a sort of early nudge towards materialism.
Interesting. But the big figures here are later.
Definitely. Francis Bacon is huge. He really championed natural philosophy, putting physics based on sense experience right at the center.
The trust your senses.
Absolutely. He stressed the infallibility of the senses as the source of all knowledge. Experience, methods like induction and experiment, that was the path. And importantly, he saw motion, including things like vital impulse, as a primary quality of matter itself.
Okay. And then Hobbes comes along and systematizes Bacon's ideas.
Yeah, Hobbes really builds a system on it. He loved the certainty of geometry, wanted philosophy to be like that. For him, knowledge comes from the senses. Concepts are just phantoms or echoes of sensations in the mind.
Phantoms. I like that.
And the whole idea of unbodily substance, like a soul without a body, just nonsense and absurdity. He famously argued you couldn't separate thought from thinking matter. Even human passions were just mechanical processes, and humans are totally subject to nature's laws. Very deterministic.
A very physical view of us.
Yeah.
But then Locke. Locke is the game changer here.
Locke is absolutely crucial. His essay concerning humane understanding, that's the work that really provided the killer argument, the proof for Bacon's big idea that all our knowledge, all our ideas come from the world of sensation and our experience of it.
So the blank slate idea, essentially.
Exactly, the tabula rasa. And his work was huge in France. It basically founded this philosophy of bon sens common sense. It just clicked with people. The focus shifted completely to how we learn from the world.
And Locke's student, Condillac, brought this directly to France.
That's right. Condillac took Locke's sensationalism and used it like a weapon against that older 17th-century metaphysics. He argued very effectively that things like the soul, the senses, how we form ideas, how we perceive things, it's all just a matter of experience and habit.
Experience and habit.
Yeah, and this led him to this incredibly powerful conclusion. Human development depends entirely on education and external circumstances.
Wow. Okay, the implications of that are massive, aren't they? If it's all environment and education.
Totally. And this is where the French really ran with it. Our sources say they took this maybe slightly dry English materialism and civilized it.
Civilized it? How so?
They added wit, flesh and blood, eloquence, temperament, grace. Basically made it more dynamic, more applicable to social life. It wasn't just about how we know things anymore. It became a philosophy for living, for changing society.
Right, making it active, not just descriptive. So these two trends, the Cartesian and the Lockean, they start to blend.
They definitely do. You see it clearly in Helvetius. With him, materialism gets this really distinct French character. He applies it immediately to social life.
Okay.
He talks about sensory qualities, self-love, enjoyment, and importantly, correctly understood personal interest as the basis for morality. And he hammers home that idea of the natural equality of human intelligence and the omnipotence of education.
The omnipotence of education. Again, huge social implications there. This is where philosophy starts looking like a blueprint for society.
Exactly. And you see the synthesis elsewhere, too. Lemetry's man machine, we mentioned that it specifically weaves together Descartes' physics with English materialism. And Holbach's Système de la Nature does something similar. The physical parts draw on both, while the moral parts lean heavily on Helvetius. It's this rich mixing of ideas, creating something new and powerful.
So it's not just about tracing these lines of thought, is it? It's really about understanding this major philosophical fight.
Absolutely.
The French Enlightenment, French materialism, it was an open, clearly expressed struggle, as the sources say, against the dominant metaphysics of the 17th century. People like Descartes, Malebranche, Spinoza, Leibniz.
Right. Philosophy was deliberately being set up against metaphysics, kind of like how Feuerbach later challenged Hegel's more abstract speculations.
So this battle wasn't just academic, it was aimed at the philosophical underpinnings of the whole era, including its political and religious structures.
Yes, exactly. By the early 18th century, the positive sciences were really breaking away from metaphysics anyway. Metaphysics, according to our sources, had kind of lost its connection to the real world, its positive secular element, and had become a bit insipid, stale.
It needed shaking up. And a key figure in that shakeup was Pierre Bayle.
Oh, Bayle was crucial, absolutely instrumental in undermining the theoretical credibility of 17th-century metaphysics. He used skepticism, basically, the tool of questioning certainty.
Turning their own methods against them.
Precisely. He became its historian, almost, documenting its flaws and its downfall, really going after Spinoza and Leibniz in particular.
And he didn't just critique, right? He went further.
He did. He famously argued for the possibility of an atheistic society. Just the possibility was radical then. He was essentially heralding its arrival. That's why he's described as sort of the last metaphysician in the 17th century sense and the first philosopher in the 18th century sense.
Wow. That's a major turning point. It makes you wonder, how much do these deep shifts in philosophy actually change the whole social fabric, moving from, say, a God-centered view to one that allows for a purely secular world?
It's fundamental, isn't it? Though, interestingly, Spinoza's ideas, Spinozism, didn't just vanish.
Right, you mentioned that.
It popped up in French forms that basically treated matter as the ultimate substance, and it also influenced deism, the idea of a creator god who doesn't intervene. Our sources see these as like two sects arguing over Spinoza's true meaning, but ultimately reflecting the same core principle just from different angles.
Okay, so metaphysics was challenged in France, but it didn't die everywhere.
Not at all. While the French Enlightenment largely pushed it aside, it had this major comeback, a victorious and substantial restoration in German philosophy, especially in the 19th century, with figures like Hegel leading the charge in speculative philosophy.
Ah, Hegel.
But interestingly, our sources suggest that ultimately, materialism, especially when refined by philosophical work itself and aligned with humanism, will eventually win out over speculative metaphysics. It's framed as this long, ongoing intellectual contest across Europe.
A real saga.
Okay.
Now, perhaps the most impactful part of this whole story, the thing that really resonates today, this direct, undeniable link from that Lockean sensationalist trend of French materialism straight to 19th century socialism and communism.
Yes. This is where the philosophical ideas cash out, politically and socially. And what's fascinating is how the core materialist ideas almost logically lead there.
How so?
Well, if all our knowledge and sensations come from the sensory world, right, then it follows that the world itself, the empirical world, has to be set up so that humans can experience what's truly human if we are shaped by our environment.
Then the environment has to be made human.
Exactly. It puts this huge onus on society to create conditions for human flourishing. It's a radical shift in responsibility.
So these ideas we saw earlier, like the inherent goodness, or at least potential goodness of people, their equal intellectual capacity, the absolute power of experience, habit, education, the huge influence of the environment, the importance of industry, even the justification of enjoyment.
All of that.
They stop being just abstract points and become, like, the necessary ingredients for building communism and socialism.
The logic is, to improve people, you must first fix the external world they live in.
Precisely. And that ties into the principle of correctly understood interest from Helvetius and Holbach. The idea is that, ideally, what's good for the individual, their private interests must align with what's good for everyone, the interest of humanity.
Which immediately raises the question, how do you structure society so that happens? So my desires naturally help the common good.
That's the million-dollar question they were grappling with, yeah.
And this thinking even changed ideas about crime, didn't it? The argument wasn't just about punishing individuals. No, it shifted the focus. If environment is key, then crime isn't just an individual failing. You need to destroy the antisocial sources of crime, poverty, ignorance, bad conditions. And society needs to give every person social scope for the vital manifestation of his being, room to live fully and positively.
It's a move from blaming the person to examining the system. Profound.
And this wasn't just theory stuck in books. You see the tendencies early on. Thinkers like Mandeville in England, a follower of Locke, wrote his Apologia of Vices.
Right, controversial stuff.
Very. He basically argued that in modern society, things we call vices like greed or luxury are actually indispensable. They drive the economy. Now, the sources are clear. This wasn't him cheering for modern society.
More like a critique.
Exactly. It was an observation saying, look, if our society needs vice to function, then maybe the society itself is the problem. That has clear socialist implications.
Okay, I see the connection. And then the links get even more explicit later.
Oh, absolutely. Fourier, the utopian socialist, directly built on these French materialist teachings. Babouvist communism, a very early radical communist movement in France, also explicitly drew its ideas from French materialism.
Wow.
And it keeps going. Helvetius's ideas influenced Jeremy Bentham in England, with his system of correctly understood interest.
Utility maximizing happiness.
Right. And Bentham's ideas then directly inspired Robert Owen to found English communism, setting up model communities. And then French communists like Desmy and Gay explicitly developed materialism as the teaching of real humanism and the logical basis of communism.
So it's not a stretch at all. There's a clear traceable line for these philosophical arguments about matter and senses right through to revolutionary political movements.
A very clear, consistent thread. It shows just how powerfully abstract ideas can shape concrete action in history.
Absolutely. So wrapping this up, from those roots in Descartes' physics and Locke's focus on senses, through all those intense battles against 17th-century metaphysics, French materialism clearly wasn't just some academic exercise.
Not at all. It was a truly transformative force.
It fundamentally changed how people thought about, well, us, humanity, society, and ultimately our ability, our potential to build a completely different kind of world.
Indeed. We've seen how its core ideas, the power of education, the shaping force of environment, the need to align personal interests with the common good, weren't just philosophical points. They provided a solid theoretical foundation that directly fed into socialist and communist thinking.
Yeah.
It's just a stark reminder, isn't it? Ideas really do have consequences. They ripple outwards and shape history in ways the original thinkers might never have even imagined.
Definitely. So, thinking about all this, what does it mean for you listening now? If, as these materialists argued so forcefully, our development really does hinge on education and our surroundings, and what we know comes primarily from our senses, our experience of the world, what kind of responsibility does that put on all of us collectively?
To actually try and build an environment, a society that nurtures what they call the truly human in everyone. It's a challenging thought, really. If society shapes us so profoundly, what kind of society are we actively building, or maybe just passively allowing to be built right now for ourselves and for the future?